Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. So we continue on. So as you may remember, I am rereading the Stephen King books. And we did an episode on Carrie, which was his first published novel. And so today, Salem's Lot.
I love this movie.
The original
Yes.
TV series. Got it.
Yes.
So it was an original. There was an original 1979 American television series, which was a 2-part miniseries. Do you remember watching this as a young person? I imagine not live, but I mean, like,
Yeah.
is that when you first watched it?
Yeah, and then I rewatched it.
Like recently?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I rewatched it again for this episode.
Me too.
And just forgot how terrifying it still is.
Yes, David Soul, Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah, that's what he's from.
And James at 15, the kid that was in everything, who actually, well, let me back up. One of the reasons why this is cool is because there is a new Salem's Lot coming out, which has been kind of controversial. The new Salem's Lot movie was scheduled by Warner Brothers to open September 9th in 2022. Mm-hmm. And then they delayed it to April 21st, 2023. And then they pulled it off the schedule entirely. And many of us were figuring, if you were following along, that they were going to shelve it indefinitely and use it as a tax write-off, because Hollywood does that all the time. They make these big movies, they spend a bunch of money on them, and then for whatever reason, many reasons happen, they literally shelve them, never to see the light of day, and they use it as a gigantic, $90 million or whatever tax write-off. And a lot of people thought that that's what was going to happen. But now the news is saying that Salem's Lot is going to go straight to streaming on HBO Max, and that's where we're going to see it. Now, the people in it are apparently Lewis Pullman as, the main character, Alfre Woodard, Mackenzie Lee, Bill Camp, Spencer Treat Clark. A bunch of people are in this. And, we all love a vampire movies. Hopefully they don't fuck it up, because the guy who directed it, he adapted the It movies, the 2 big It movies for King's books. He also wrote the 3 Annabelle movies, the 2 Nun spinoffs for the Conjuring franchise. So I'm hopeful that it's not because it's, awful or anything. It's just for whatever reason, this is how it's going. So, and King has been pretty vocal on social media about, he doesn't know why Warner Brothers is holding back, that he has seen the movie. It's not embarrassing or anything. His quote was, "Old school horror filmmaking, slow build, big payoff," which is always what Salem's Lot has been. Even the book is like that. So we'll see what happens. I do really hope it comes out on Max sooner rather than later, but we don't know when. So
Yeah, I kept looking it up, and I'm like, this is so weird, because the year, it's confusing when you go online. Because I'm like, did I miss something? This didn't come out yet.
Yeah, they literally just announced that it's coming out on Max. It's going to go straight to streaming, which, is no problem these days. A lot of stuff happens that way. Whereas back in the day, that would have been called straight to cable, and we would know it was garbage. But now a lot of big, good movies go straight to streaming. We'll see. But so there's the book, which was largely written actually before King published Carrie. So a lot of this book was written even before Carrie was written, which I think speaks to a few things, but I'll get into that in a minute. And then there was the 1979 American television series. And then there was Return to Salem's Lot, which was the second movie, which I had never seen before, which I watched, and is just a total piece of garbage.
Yeah, I think I remember trying to watch that a while back.
It's so bad, Kathy. Oh, God.
That's why I skipped it.
It's so bad. I had to watch it for this because I'm like, all right, now's the time. And it was really, really bad. So I cannot recommend.
Oh, yeah.
Not bad, not trashy in a good way. Like, not trashy in a fun way. Just bad. And then there's the 2004 remake 2-part television series with Rob Lowe. Mm-hmm. So you could check that out if you like. And then there's the new the new one that has not been coming out. It's not coming out yet. So I reread the book, as I did with Carrie. And it is very interesting. And now I did read it. One of our first, I think it was our second book in our book club on the Terror Talk Discord, our horror and thriller book club. We read Salem's Lot. So this was during COVID. So I read it then. I reread it more mindfully this time because I knew I was going to talk about it. And so this time, I had read it as a kid. It wasn't my I didn't read it like right when it came out or anything. I was way too young. I did read it later as a young person, and I have to say it was never my favorite. I know that Salem's Lot is some people's like diehard absolute favorite book ever. And I think I can understand that if you read it as a young person when it first came out, because you didn't know what it was going to be. In other words, it was actually Carrie had come out, and that was a particular kind of fast read, plot driven. A lot of stuff happens. It's a small novel. And so, of course, a sophomore effort by an author that makes a big splash with their first book is going to be really circumspect. And when it came out and it was this big book and nobody knew what to think and nobody knew what it was going to be. In other words, you didn't know it was vampires. Looking back at it right now, I don't know how you could not know.
Yeah.
Because honestly, Salem's Lot is super derivative. It's like, whenever he does vampires in this book, it's very Dracula oriented.
It's like in Nosferatu.
There's nothing particularly original about how the vampires are portrayed. And Stephen King himself has spoken about like his influences for this novel were like Peyton Place and Dracula and Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So it's like, which makes sense. All those things are very representative, but the uniqueness, I guess, for a King fan, and if you're trying to put yourself in their shoes back in the day, is that it's like the second novel making such a splash because it was so different than Carrie. And yet it was so big and so interesting because it was so slow burn. And it was vampires and they weren't expecting it. I personally am interested in the like cutout working class misogynistic, really unlikable townspeople that all live in this small town. And there's obviously a few people that are very likable, and there's tons of characters. It's very much that small town, like, let's meet everyone, let's know about everyone. There's this romance going on. It takes a very, very, very long time for anything to happen. And the book is basically built out into 3 parts. And so by the end of the first part, I mean, not a ton has happened. Things are happening, but you don't know what it is. And then by the second part, then the vampire shit starts to happen and you get more interested. But basically, for those of you who don't know, it's about this guy named Ben Mears, who in the original movies played by David Soul, who we were joking about, Starsky and Hutch, which is this really old detective cop TV show that he was on. The actor was on. And Ben Mears is a writer in this book. And as we know, Stephen King has, like probably 10 or 15 books that are like the writer is the central character. And the funny thing about it is in the book, he looks like Stephen King. He's got like black hair.
That's cool.
He's like skinny, all this stuff. Kind of describes himself how King has always described himself, like not very attractive kind of thing. And then, of course, the movie, it's like David Soul is like blonde, very handsome 70s actor, so it's a little different. But so the point is that Ben grows up in this small town, Jerusalem's Lot. And he has pretty bad memories of it. And in particular of the Marston house, which is house on Hill House, right? Like it's like the house up on the hill that none of the kids want to go near because it's haunted or it's awful. And back in the day, the house was inhabited. And while it was inhabited, a bunch of kids went missing. And so it's been uninhabited for a really long time. And then all of a sudden in this book, it becomes inhabited. Ben goes there thinking, I'm going to rent the Marston house and I'm going to write a book on it. And he gets there and someone has already rented it out and it's cloaked in mystery who it is. And the person that actually rented it, you don't see them. And then there's like a caretaker that you do see. So it's got that total Dracula feel, right? Like the Dracula's in the basement and, the guy that takes care of Dracula is the guy that's taking care of everything. Anyway, Ben's really disappointed. He's like, shit, I was going to rent that house and write this book. And now I can't. He rents a room, still going to write his book. And then we spend, 100 pages getting to know the townspeople. The woman he's staying with, the guys at the bar. He meets a girl. There's a romance. There's sex. There's all the things. I think the point is you're supposed to get very invested in all of these characters and care about them. But you really don't. And I think King, in many ways, intentionally did not make a lot of really endearing characters there because he kills them off, like, with a lot of, gore and, like, you don't have a ton of attachment except to the main character and maybe his girlfriend.
I think that's true.
Yeah. And
I mean, at least in the movie, I haven't read the book, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's true in the book. I mean, in the book, there's the differences between the movie and the book are vast. But one of the differences that is meaningful is that there's a lot more of the characters in the book, meaning you do get to know all these freaking people. Like everybody and their brother has something to say, and all these names and stuff. And I didn't have a hard time following it all because most of the characters in town are these really caricature kind of working class. Like I said, it was the 70s, so they're using the FAG word. They're using all of the words that we find offensive now. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of misogyny. There's a lot of bias against, women doing this, women doing that. There's all of those characters in a working class small town. And so it's hard to differentiate between all those characters because there's so many of them and the town is full of them. When they die off or horrible things happen to them or they turn into vampires and die, like, you just don't really give a shit because it's like King didn't really spend a ton of time developing them. It's like, because we're looking at this in hindsight, he goes on to write tons of books about small towns and Derry and Castle Rock, and he creates these whole worlds, these whole small town worlds. And I think this was his first start at it. I think he wrote Jerusalem's Lot, which is a short story, and then he made this. What I would say in looking back is that as an adult looking at it as not a new thing and as having, I haven't read all of Stephen King's books, like not by a long shot, but the ones I have read, looking back at it, I can't say it's my favorite because it feels very derivative and it also feels very much like it's so slow burn. And I don't care about a lot of the characters.
That's hard because usually if it's a slow burn, if you're at least invested in what happens to this person or, the story moves around or whatever, if you have a relationship with those characters, you can at least go for that ride.
And I can say that, like, while reading it, it's not that I didn't enjoy the read. Like, I really do enjoy Stephen King's, like, voice. Like, I have always enjoyed the way he writes. And I'm gonna see as I reread, my opinion might change, right? Like, because next it's gonna be The Shining, and we'll see. It's like, and then it's gonna be The Stand, which for a lot of people they didn't like that book, and for a lot of people it was their favorite, and that was mine. The Stand, when I first read it, that was like a revolutionary novel for me. Now, if I read The Stand and feel the same way, then we know where we are. We'll know where we stand because I'm not sure. And the Bachman novels and all of that. So we're really early on in all of Stephen King's stuff, like the heyday of the 70s where he wrote, Carrie and Salem's Lot and The Shining and The Stand and The Dead Zone. And I mean, my God, so many epic. And then you move into the 80s with Firestarter and Cujo, etc. And I loved Cujo as well.
Yeah.
So we'll just kind of see. With only having now reread 2 novels, like, I can very clearly say that although Carrie is a hard story and hard to read, it's a really good book. Like his first book but also not his first written book. He wrote The Dead Zone first. I mean, he wrote Salem's Lot first. So we'll just kind of see. But I also wanted to get into the. Kathy actually did some horror facts with Salem's Lot.
I did Salem facts with Kat. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. How did they intensify the creepiness of the child vampire window scene? They did something special to it.
They did something special, did they?
They did.
All right. Got it.
Number 2. This horror director turned down directing this film, aka made-for-TV movie, feeling he wouldn't be able to make the film the way he wanted to with the restrictions of network television.
I think I know that one, but I'll wait.
Number 3, the map of Salem's Lot in Crockett's real estate office resembles the city of blank in the U.S.
Okay.
Number 4, what is the name of the scary house that overlooks the town? And then lastly, number 5, what does Ben take from the haunted house when he's a little boy? When he was a little boy.
Thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
I know a couple of those, but a couple of them I don't. So that'll be interesting. So in general, what I would say about just having reread Carrie and then rereading Salem's Lot is that Carrie is like this lean moving, fast moving book. And even when you're in the characters where yes, there's still love stories. Yes, there's sex scenes, just like in Salem's Lot. It's quick. It's going. It's a page turner. Great choice to have that as the first book to like put him on the map, because Salem's Lot is kind of endless. It's like all this prose, all these long stories about things. Now, again, I don't mind it as much because I do find it interesting. I do find Stephen King's voice interesting. I've always liked the worlds he puts us in. I think the world building is really great. It's just that it goes on and on and on. And I can only say that because I'm about to read The Shining and then The Stand. Those are big ass books. So, but the world he puts you in, right? So like the world that he puts you in The Shining, amazing. The world he puts you in The Stand, it's like post-apocalyptic, like one of the very first really famous post-apocalyptic books that I remember. The world he puts you in Salem's Lot is this, at that time, it was his first like big small town, get to know all the characters, and there's this scary house on the hill, and then there's vampires and all this shit goes down. So that world, I'm really okay with being in it, but it didn't hit the same way as back in the day, for sure.
Okay.
Because it's just not as new. Like I can't step aside and say like, well, I love it because I loved it when I was younger.
Yeah.
I don't really want to do it that way. I want to kind of look at them from this vantage point as opposed to like just loving something because I loved it back then.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I experienced it differently this time. So, and there's a lot of differences between the book and the series.
I think there typically is with him just because his books are so robust.
Right?
It's hard to, and you have to make something a movie. Mm-hmm. So, that's where I think a lot of people will walk away and say, well, why wasn't this added in? Things translate differently when you're doing a film.
Well, and I know that it's like one of his favorite books he's ever written too. Yeah. So, and maybe that's because of nostalgia too. Maybe because he loves like looking back at that first big world that he built. I don't know. What I think is I think that we get a glimpse of who Stephen King became in his writing. Like the ambition that he had to build out all these characters in this big world and make this epic vampire book. feels like that was the ambition. It's just that he wasn't quite there maybe in his writing yet, because I feel like he executed that, at least from what I remember right now. Like I said, 5-6 more books into this, if I get through the 70s and the 80s and I look at them and I kind of like look at what I loved and what I didn't love, or what I think about them, I might feel differently. But I get where he was trying to go. I just feel like he may have executed it better in later books. But I do love that TV series. There's no violence shown in it. Did you notice that?
There isn't.
No.
A lot of it is just the use of makeup, camera, suggestion. You know, like what a good scary movie or show, how it should make you feel. Mm-hmm. To me, it was much more of that than it was anything. Like it's not overly gory. It's not, but the vampires are so terrifying, and the way in which they arrive and transform, to me, to this day, still scares the crap out of me. That first scene when the child shows up in the window.
Yeah, which is about an hour in. I actually made a note. It was like an hour and 5 minutes in. It's fucking classic. And I don't know that it scares me now. It's certainly creepy. But it's more that like, oh my God, I remember seeing that for the first time. I just have this like flood of nostalgia of the classic vampire kid hovering outside the window and scritch, scritch, scritch on the window. And like this weird fucking vacant smile, not even, not in his eyes. And it's just scritch, scritch,
oh, it's
scritch.
so creepy. And then I think what I always do is put myself in the position of the kid in bed. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I would have a heart attack. I mean, I know that he's like kind of possessed by this demon at this moment. So he's not freaking out, but I'm like, that is the biggest nightmare of a child, is to wake up and see a monster or see something like that. Mm-hmm. And then how it's like just outside of that glass and it's inviting him to invite him in.
Oh my God.
That is so terrifying.
And then they do it like 2 or 3 more times, and it's just like, it's scary every single time. It's like a different kid in a different outfit, in his jammies or whatever.
Yes.
And then about 2 hours in, there's the classic, these are just classic things. Classic, dad sitting in the rocking chair with the white eyes and everything, and he's just in his chair in the room, and the guy comes in and he just like growling to himself and stuff.
Yeah.
He's sitting in the dark in that same room that you've seen the vamps come to the window. And it's just this classic, and he does this vampire hiss. It's just so.
I think it's like that classic vampire movie that made us all afraid of vampires. That's what I think of. What I think of when I hear Salem's Lot and I think of that movie, and maybe because I saw it as a kid, it's still that story that it's like, that to me is one of the scariest retellings of Dracula, Nosferatu, whatever.
It's the nostalgia of it.
Yes.
To me. Yeah, for sure. Because I think because it was a TV series, and because, we didn't have It yet, that was in the 80s, like that was the only way like kids, if your parents weren't paying attention, could have access to that kind of thing. And again, it's on TV in the late 70s or whatever. There's no gore, there's no blood, there's no violence really, except against women, I noticed in the book and in that TV series is like violence against women and in protection of women is a real theme in this TV miniseries, because like the guy that's abusing his wife, there's like violence against women, but then there's also like, I'm gonna kill you because you hurt my woman, like protecting the woman and killing another guy, like, or hurting another person. There's a lot of that. I was just really struck by that, because that's not something, it's something we see a lot of, obviously, around, but it was just, I just noticed that as a theme. But anyway, that would not have hit us as weird then.
Right. And I don't know. To me, like when I knew this was on our list to talk about, I was like, oh, I'm so excited for this one, because this is just historically one of my favorite vampire stories.
And the morgue scene, which is just over like 2.5 hours in or whatever, the morgue scene is really classic. And and I wanted to mention, it cracks me up. He has a popsicle stick cross.
Yes.
I forgot that. I was like, he literally, those old popsicle sticks that you used to get frozen.
Yeah.
And he literally puts 2 popsicle sticks together and tapes them together. And that's his cross, like in the epic.
I totally forgot about that.
Made me laugh so hard. I even wrote it down. I'm like, he literally has a popsicle stick.
Oh my God.
I wanted to mention really quick before we get to the answers of your trivia is that Lance Kerwin, who is the young boy actor in Salem's Lot, he also was on a series in the 70s called James at 15. He was really famous as a child actor. And he actually just died at the age of 62.
I saw that.
Yeah, in San Clemente, California. I just wanted to mention that because he was certainly in this movie and James at 15 when I watched that in reruns and a lot of the other child acting things that he did as a teen. Every time I put Salem's Lot on, I look at Starsky and Hutch and I look at this kid and I just remember that. And it's part of the nostalgia. And then when I was doing a little bit of cobbling together my thoughts for this episode, I saw that he had died. And
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I went and looked him up. I'm like, I wonder where, and then it was fairly recent, right?
Yeah.
And it was like a heart, something with his heart.
yeah, really young, 62.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that, R.I.P. because he was definitely a part of my young life.
Aww.
Horrifacts with Salem and the vampires in a small town of Israel.
Isn't it? What's the name of the town? Isn't it like Israel?
Jerusalem.
Oh, Jerusalem.
It's Israel.
Salem, Lord, and Jerusalem.
That was amazing.
Oh my gosh. Well, it wasn't there actually. It was in the East Coast and just named that. Okay. Anyway, how did they intensify the creepiness of the child vampire's window scene?
I don't know.
They filmed it in reverse and they propped him up on a boom crane.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reverse is obvious now,
and then they hooked him up on a boom crane so he was like floating in. It was effective.
It was effective.
Because then they had like the dry ice and the whole thing.
No. It was scary as fuck, man. It was really scary. And I don't know.
All you out there making horror films, use a boom crane. It's effective.
It was really effective, for low budge and all that.
Horror director turned this down because he didn't think he'd be able to make it the way he wanted due to the restrictions of network television.
That would be George Romero.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been interesting to see what he would have done with that. I
know.
think he would have made it gorier.
Yeah. If history serves.
Yes.
Well, he's basically saying I couldn't do it on TV.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Because I can't do it without the gore.
I can't have like people exploding and flesh tearing.
Yeah, no.
The map of Salem's Lot in Crockett's real estate office resembles the city of blank in the U.S. If you really, really think about it, it makes a lot of sense.
I don't know.
Where do we see vampires?
On hills?
New Orleans.
Oh, New Orleans. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
What is the name of the scary house that overlooks the town?
The Marston House.
Correct, Shannon.
Thank you.
2 out of 4. And then lastly, what does Ben take from the haunted house when he was a little boy?
I don't remember.
A snow globe.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
There it is.
Thank you for that.
You bet.
I'm enjoying my Stephen King reread.
I'm glad.
I really am. He was a seminal author to me back in the day, as I know he is for a lot of people when they start reading horror, still to this day. So
yeah,
it's pretty great. And the movies are super fun to revisit as well, because they've made movies of most of them. So I'm looking forward to it. And what would normally be the next book would normally be Rage, which was a Bachman novel that he put out. And then There are 4 Bachman novels because he wrote under an alias, Richard Bachman. And then they were put into a book, of which I have a first edition of. And I'm not going to do the Bachman novels next. I'm going to jump to The Shining. And then once all 4 of the Bachman novels are out, which I think is like right after Cujo, then I'll do the Bachman novels as a whole. And I'll do those 4 short stories. Because one of those short stories was my absolute favorite Stephen King thing ever written for a really long time. And it's called Rage, and it was taken out of print because it's about a school shooting, and they took it off the shelves, and they took it out of print. It's out of print because of the subject matter. But I have a copy of it, so I'm going to read it, but I'm not going to do it till the Bachman novels. So the next one will be The Shining. I hope you guys come along on the journey for me. So start reading The Shining, and then in season 7, when the fall starts, we'll do a Shining episode. So
That'll be good.
That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you so much, Kathy, for coming along with me on this. It's a lot of fun. So this has been an episode of Terror Talk. My name is Shannon.
And I'm Kathy. Sleep safe, everyone.